The next concept we're going to cover are switch and case statements. Switch and case statements are provided to branch code based on discrete values of variables that are tested. They're very similar to if, else if, and else statements, except that it provides a way to keep your code much cleaner and more easy to read. And they're especially nice when working with enumerated types, such as the stages type. The switch value that's provided is used to route execution to one of the list of provided case groups. And we're going to get into that in a second. But just understand that you can take multiple case values, such as if you're using numbers, you can combine several numbers together and say that when they're the value of the tested value, that code will run. And with any given switch statement, only a single case group will run. And finally, you can provide a default case, which is similar to the else statement in an if clause, that will catch any of the uncovered values. Within a case group, you can also have additional code and logic, so you could provide your own if statements, or you can provide other switch statements, or pretty much anything else you want to do. And finally, all cases must end with either a break to exit the switch statement or a return to exit the method. Now let's take a look at some switch case conditions in action. And this might seem like very complicated code at first, so we're going to break it into small pieces. The first thing I want to point out is that we've got a variable called number, like we've done in the past, and we're going to get that number. And if we wanted to write a if, else if, and else statements to do one thing if the value of number was 10, another thing if it was 11 to 14, a third thing if it was 15, and a fourth thing if it was anything else, that code could get fairly complicated. But an easy way to do it is to use the switch statement where we switch on that number itself. And that switch will then route the code execution to one of the four case groups below. So if number is 10, it'll go to the case where it says 10. And this will execute only in that scenario. And even though we're changing number to 15 in this code block, it will not run at this point for case 15 below. So it only evaluates that number once, and then it runs its code block, and then it will break out of this switch statement as we've defined. However, if the value of number is 11, 12, 13, or 14, it'll return the value 100, which is pretty arbitrary here, but just to illustrate the point of combining a series of cases into a single group. However, if the value is 15, it will return something else, just its own set of discrete functionality. And if it wasn't any of these, for example, if it was less than 10 or greater than 15, it'll run through the default block, which won't do anything, it'll just break. And an important thing to note is that you can provide some of these case statements and put a break inside there if you want to call them out through negation. So if you want to make sure that they don't run in these particular cases, you can just have a break or a return. Now inside Hold Em, we might use the switch case statements in order to make life a little more easy. Now we're going to start off on our method. At the very bottom, we're just going to say we want to return the call amount. So we'll assume that if we get through any of the switch work we do, we're just going to call. Now the switch itself very likely will switch on the tables stage. Now in the current stage, if it happens to be the opening, we'll put in some conditional code in there. So we'll say in the opening stage, if the best hand we have right now is a pair, we'll actually raise. But if it's not a pair, we're just going to break out of the switch statement. So if we're executing and we get called to provide our bet, we look and we see we're in the opening stage, our if statement runs and it turns out that we don't have a pair, then it will break out, and that break will fall all the way outside the switch, so after the closing brace, and it will say return table.callAmount, and it'll just call. In our default scenario though, meaning that we're not in the stages.opening, we're just going to return 0 chips, which means we check or fold. This isn't really a commentary on strategy, this is just providing a very simple case for you to understand how a switch statement might be used in a sophisticated scenario like Texas Hold'em.